Good evening from Jerusalem. We are live, and I welcome all people who have joined this seminar. We'll begin in just another 10 seconds. Shalom and welcome to this exclusive briefing by senior fellows of the Misgav Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy on the war against Hamas. The Misgav Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy is a new Jerusalem-based think tank that seeks to strengthen Israel as a Jewish, democratic, strong, secure, and thriving state through the advancement of pragmatic and realistic national security policies and grounded in the values of Zionism. Meir Ben Shabbat, a former chief of Israel's National Security Council and advisor to the Prime Minister, and former chief of the Israel Security Agency Gaza Command, is head of the Institute. Today, of course, we're focusing on the new war against Hamas that has fallen upon us. With us are two of our senior fellows, Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, former head of research in IDF military intelligence. He'll be speaking to us about Israel's next steps against Hamas and perhaps against Hezbollah. Also addressing us today is Ophir Gendelman, a senior fellow at the Institute, who is the former spokesman of the Prime Minister and the Israel Foreign Ministry to the Arab world. Ophir will be speaking to us about what Israel must do now in the eyes of the Arab and Palestinian world. There will be an opportunity for you to pose questions to our two senior fellows at the end of their two briefings. You're welcome to forward your questions to us by posting them on the chat function in this Zoom interface. I'll conclude by thanking everyone in the Jewish and broader world who has stood with Israel in these recent days, and conclude with the prayer that you will continue to be with us as we move forward into what will undoubtedly be a long and difficult campaign ahead. So without further ado, Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, we'd be glad to hear from you.
Thank you, David, and hello to everybody. These are very difficult days here in Israel, with more and more footage coming from this terrible, brutal attack by Hamas that left 1,300 Israelis dead. And obviously, everybody in Israel understands that everything after October 7th is not going to look like what it used to be before October 7th. First and foremost, in the context of Gaza. That's everybody understands this has to change dramatically. And we are still preparing ourselves and taking the first steps in making this happen. But the commitment to change the situation in Gaza completely is clear. And the main issue at stake right now is to better define what are the goals in Gaza. And this has not yet been done. It's very clear we are talking about decisively defeating Hamas. But what does that mean? Does that mean that we just deprive Hamas from its military capabilities, from its terroristic capabilities, and from its abilities to govern us? This is the common denominator that everybody agrees upon. Or are we going to do anything that includes also physically entering the centers of the population centers in Gaza and taking care of the last Hamas operative and bringing them to justice or to kicking them out? That's an open question here. It's quite clear in this respect that for achieving any of these goals, what we do now is not necessarily going to be enough. What we focus on now is two elements. One is the airstrikes that charge a heavy price from the Palestinians in general, but especially from the Hamas operatives. And we keep hitting their infrastructure, and we keep hitting their operatives, including some key Hamas terrorists that were hit. And the other thing that we are doing, we have just put a siege over Gaza, hoping that by that we shall be able to put pressure on Hamas, both on the question of whether they are able to fight or not, but even more so on the question of the hostages that are an issue of itself, and I'm going to touch upon it later on. The decision about the goals is extremely important because it's going to, of course, affect the question of whether we are going to interfere with ground forces. As I said, there's a high probability that we are going to use ground forces in this operation, but we can use the ground forces in order to have a stronger grip over the population centers and the areas where Hamas is hiding, or we can use them in order to enter the dense areas, dense urban areas, and fight from house to house. These are two options that are considered. We'll see which one is going to be chosen. It's not totally clear. There are pros and cons for every one of them. Anyhow, one thing is clear. This effort to decisively defeat Hamas, and especially the question of using the ground forces, has become an Archimedes point in the effects of this war on the relationships with the rest of the elements that comprise the Shiite axis led by Iran. Because what we're facing here is not only Hamas in Gaza, of course we do, but Hamas in Gaza is a member of this axis and operates on behalf of this axis. And it's clear that it decided to operate because it had, as part of the axis and the axis as a whole, had a certain view of what's going on. They, in my mind, thought that the West, that is the main opponent of this axis, and Israel as the representative of the West in the Middle East, are suffering from a growing weakness. And because of that, there is an opportunity here to put more pressure on them and to change the equation, as the Hamas put it. And their area where they wanted to start changing the equation was to force on Israel to lift the siege over Gaza and force on Israel in a total different relationship with Gaza, while doing that, while being able to kill as many Jews as they can, which they did quite painfully. But this was the idea of the axis. This impression of the Iranians and Hezbollah was and Hamas was created based on what they identified as weakness of the West vis-a-vis Iran. The fact that the West did nothing about the accumulation of 60% enriched uranium by Iran. The fact that the West did nothing about the Iranian support of Russia in its war in Ukraine with the UAVs. The fact that the West was doing nothing about the progress that the Iranians are making with their ballistic missiles. The fact that the sanctions upon which is going to be lifted are going to be lifted on October 18th. The fact that the West was doing nothing about the growing strengths of Iran in the region that led to the strengthening of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The fact that the West was doing nothing about the suppression of the people of Iran by the government, with all the story of Mahsa Amini and so on and so forth. The feeling was that the West has given up on the Middle East and is not going to face Iran. And the same picture was developed when this axis was looking on the relations between Israel and Hezbollah. The fact that Israel was ready to accept the gas deal that was forced upon it by Hezbollah with Lebanon, the gas deal with Lebanon, was a sign of weakness. The attitude of Israel towards all the provocations of Hezbollah during the last couple of months was another proof of that weakness, and the tensions inside Israel between the two camps that were fighting each other until recently, until the day before the attack took place, was another proof of how weak Israel is. The weakening position of Abu Mazen was another reason for them to operate, because through this operation they were able to challenge Abu Mazen and to prove that they are those who sacrifice and fight and bring accomplishments for the Palestinian people, not Abu Mazen with his weak position. And they were able in this respect, and the Iranians together with Hamas were moving a lot of weapons into the West Bank to the people of the terror groups there. And this was again a way of trying to improve the conditions before Abu Mazen leaves the stage, probably soon. Nobody knows, but this can happen anytime. And another reason for them to act now was that they were worried that Israel and the United States are moving in another direction and trying to do something about this development by promoting this idea of normal relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and they wanted to keep Saudis away from moving in this direction. And I don't know if they're going to be successful or not, but we saw that Raisi, the president of Iran, just spoke yesterday with MBS, the actual leader of Saudi Arabia. This is not a good sign. So all of that was in their mind, and they thought that this move is going to be something with which they can reap the fruits of the developments in the Middle East in the recent years, and especially in the last year. This being the case, we are now fighting back, and if we manage to hit Hamas hard, it might turn to be a wrong bargain for the Iran-led Axis, because they may eventually lose one of their major strongholds and suffer a heavy blow. And this is exactly what we mean to do. I think the Americans eventually understood that this is what's at stake. That's not only Israel's security, which are totally committed to, and we saw Biden's speech. They are definitely trying to have Israel's back, but it's not only that. What it's at stake is the international standing of the entire free world, and with the United States as its leaders, and that's why the Americans are getting involved in a more than just a declarative way. We have the American air carrier task force coming here. We have the President Biden's message to those who might wish to interfere, like Iran and Hezbollah, saying don't. And we have the supply of weapons to Israel, ammunition to guarantee that Israel has enough weapons to fight a lengthy war if necessary. All this indicates that for the Americans, there's clear understanding, and I hope for others, but I cannot say that for sure. There's a clear understanding that what's at stake is not only the fate of the Israelis in the south, but it's about the world order. And they understand that this Iran-led Axis cooperates with China and with Russia, so the threat is much bigger. On top of that, the Americans, and I think the entire West, is worried that if Hamas will be able to prove that this was a success from its point of view, this example will be followed by many other extreme radical Islamic terror groups, that both from the Shiite side and from the Sunni side. Hamas belongs to both, and they will try to carry out similar attacks, and everybody is worried about that. So it was important for the Americans to interfere and to deliver a message that we are here and we are not going to let that happen. And yes, they want us to fight according to the law, but they want us to win. And we can win fighting according to the law. There's no reason why we can't win fighting according to the law. Of course, it's going to take a little bit more time, and I hope it's not going to involve more casualties on our side because we fight by the law. But I think basically we are committed to fighting by the law in spite of the rage and the frustration that we have as the major emotions at this point of time. We understand that the major threat of, as I said, this moving into Gaza with ground forces is on a comedic point, especially in the context of the situation in the north. We understand that we can't face only Gaza. We have to face all the threats that we are surrounded with. And first amongst them is the threat coming from the north. Hezbollah is quite a formidable force that we have to reckon with. We have deployed forces along the border. We are on high alert, ready to take care of any threat coming from the north. We are so much on alert that we give ourselves early false warnings already twice, but this is a part of this situation that cannot be avoided. We are able to handle those two arenas simultaneously if necessary. We have built our forces in such a way. But of course, we prefer to focus on Hamas and leave Hezbollah for another time. We have to understand that at the same time we shall eventually have to do something about Iran, because especially if Hamas was successful, and I hope that I'm quite sure they're not going to be, but in any way, this is going to have an impact on the Iranian calculus of when and how to handle their nuclear project. And we have to be on alert that they may learn the lesson that they have to move forward, break out. So we have to be ready to handle this matter as well, together with the Americans. Two other topics that I want to touch upon before I finish. One is, as I said, the hostages issue. You know what? Let me first say a word about the calculus of Hezbollah of whether to interfere or not. On the one hand, fearing that the Axis is going to lose Gaza, Hezbollah feels that it needs to interfere in order to put more pressure on Israel and deter it from bringing an end to the control of the Gaza Strip by Hamas. On the other hand, and especially if Iran tells them to do that, it's going to be very difficult to say no. But on the other hand, Hezbollah knows that they don't have the privilege that Hamas had of catching Israel by surprise. They know that the price they're going to pay is going to be really very heavy. They know that the Lebanese people do not support them in putting Lebanon in harm's way because of some Palestinian crazy people that decided to carry out a vicious terror attack. And they know that Israel has the capability to fight against them simultaneously while fighting Hamas. So they are, for the time being, they have adopted a policy that says, we'll show that we are here, we show that we support Hamas by certain activities, but will not cross a certain line that would force Israel to take severe actions against us. And that's what they have done so far. Are they going to stay there for, even if we move on the ground? I'm not at all sure, because the message from Iran can be, you got to do something more. And that's why we have to be on alert and be ready for escalation in the north. The hostages, as I said, it's an unprecedented situation. You all know about who are these hostages and so on and so forth. I don't have to tell you the details. Hamas is trying to turn this into consideration for us to deter us from attacking it and from defeating it. We really don't have any other option but to fight Hamas as if there are no hostages, and to handle the hostages issue as there's no fight with Hamas, no war with Hamas. That's the only way we can handle that. And we know that we put the hostages in danger, but there's no other way to handle this situation. We cannot, just because of the hostages, allow Hamas to get away with what they did. There's no way for that. And so, with all due respect to the hostages, and we'll make any effort to release some of them even before the ground operation starts. We hope that we shall be able to keep them alive until the end. What we are going to do is, with this siege, we hope that this will force Hamas to let some of them free and release the rest as time goes by. But we know that you cannot count on that, and the situation may be worse than what we are seeing now. I hope the government is going to be courageous enough in order to take the steps which are going to be impossible. These are impossible choices that are going to stand in front of us. And it's easy to say it now, but once it happens, God knows what we're going to say. The last thing is the issue of the war about the hasbara, as we call it here, the war of cognition, cognitive warfare. It's amazing to see how effective the terrorists and their supporters are in trying to distort the picture completely. But we have here an unprecedented situation where everybody understands how vicious, how Daesh-like, how Nazi-like this terror attack was. And we have to show the world, to make sure that everybody understands how unbelievably vicious and monstrous this attack was. And I think we do that. A lot of NGOs and some of the government officers are involved in doing so, and we have to do more. And everybody should know exactly what happened. This comparison of Hamas with Daesh is in place because they share the same ideology, and now they share also the same way of action. And we also saw that a flag of Daesh was in the possession of one of those terrorists that was killed. So this is something that we have to make sure that everybody understands. The Palestinians now are trying to claim, okay, but we released one of the hostages and we didn't behead the victims, which is wrong. They did do it. All of these things are matters that have to be taken into account, because this battle has to have an impact on the way we see the cognitive warfare and its impact on policy in the long run. We have to understand that in the day after, this is going to have an impact. And because we're going to have a big challenge of the day after. What's going to happen in Gaza the day after? And we have to deal with that, and we need the legitimacy and to operate the way we need to operate in this respect. And we expect, following this cognitive warfare, that all kinds of people will take some measures. It's not only about understanding who is right and who is wrong. It's also taking measures based on who is right and who is wrong. We expect the United Nations to declare Hamas a terror organization, not only the United States and not only Europe, but we expect the UN to do that. We expect the West to take steps against Iran, who celebrates the murder of Jews. I spoke with many Germans during the last few days and saying to them, how can you continue having relations with Iran, which celebrates a Nazi-like killing of Jews and points at it as an achievement? Well, you have to do something about that. Same with the rest of the EU countries. Something has to be done, and Britain. Something has to be done in this respect. It's not only seeing and saying how terrible these things are. These have to be translated into a call for action and to an action. And that is extremely important. So the war over the cognitive warfare is not just who's more supporting Israel and who's less. It has to be translated into actual terms. Very difficult situation, and I hope I touched on some of the issues that worry you and on your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, General Cooperwasser. I believe that the core of the presentation we just heard is or was General Cooperwasser's pointing out the strategic weaknesses of Israel and the Western world as perceived by the Iranians. There was a significantly long list detailed by General Cooperwasser of actions and inactions which may have led Iran and its proxies to believe that Israel and the West had gone soft and became easy prey. And as you mentioned, General Cooperwasser, hopefully, and God willing, Israel will be able to turn this around, beginning with the crushing of the Hamas and moving beyond that to the stymieing of Iran and its camp, their hegemonic ambitions across the region and indeed across the world. So thank you for that stark, sobering, and very clear presentation. We move now to my colleague, Ophir Gendelman. Ophir, as I mentioned, served for close to 2 decades as Israel's primary spokesman to the Arab world, first in the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and then for many years in the Israeli Prime Minister's office. He's probably one of the faces of Israelis best known across the world, the Arab world. Certainly his voice in flawless Arabic. I think, Ophir, you've appeared on more Arab television stations and radio stations and websites over the past week than most Israelis will ever appear in their entire lifetime. It's important for us to understand how this conflict and how Israel is being perceived in the Arab world. And I thank you in advance for your presentation.
David, thank you very much. Hello all, it's good to be with you. I'd like to touch briefly upon the way that this war is perceived in the Arab world and what does the Arab world want to see. First, I have to start off by saying that this war has also surprised the Arab world. The Arab world saw these horrendous pictures and footage from the communities adjacent to Gaza, and many were horrified. If Hamas wanted to have a PR coup with airing those atrocities live, and its terrorists had pro-go cameras, and they broadcast everything live through social media. And naturally, within seconds, minutes, it was aired also in many Arab TV channels, including Al Jazeera, which is a huge backer of Hamas, of course, in times like these. And these pictures have actually backfired. If Hamas wanted to show that it has supposedly crossed the Bar-Lev line of the Gaza Strip, while destroying everything in its path, those pictures backfired. Every Arab who saw these terrorists storming into homes, shooting at people from close range, thought immediately of ISIS. The comparison is uncanny. So when Hamas tried to present itself as the defender of Gaza and Palestine, as the liberator of the Gaza border, it actually made it very clear to the entire Arab world that it's actually a Palestinian ISIS. And this has been the Israeli message from the get-go, and this message was very widely received in the Arab media and in Arab public opinion. We are seeing on social media unprecedented expressions of support of Israel. I have never seen anything like it, ever. I've been in the business for over 20 years. I've never seen anything like it. Saudis, Kuwaitis, Emiratis, Moroccans, Egyptians, all against Hamas, all saying that Hamas is ISIS, that its atrocities do not represent Islam, and so forth. So when we see today Hamas officials try to distance themselves and their organization from those atrocities, we know that Hamas is facing a huge problem in the Arab world. Make no mistake, the Arab world, especially the moderate countries, want Hamas defeated. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, all perceive Hamas as a terrorist organization. They perceive it as an enemy, once because it serves Iran, and twice because it serves the Muslim Brotherhood. It's actually, two tentacles in one of terrorism, of danger. It serves the main adversary and enemy of the Arabs, Iran, and of course the Muslim Brotherhood. What do we do now? When it comes to PR, public diplomacy, or whatever you want to call it, we should show the Arab world, and this is what the Israeli government is doing, we should show the Arab world what Hamas has done. Hamas cannot hide and deny those pictures. It is trying very, very hard. It is saying that, these pictures are false, are doctored, and so forth, but nobody buys it. I've been on many, many Arab TV channels in the last few days. The narrative that Hamas is trying to push, as if these claims are false, that doesn't work. The pictures and footage speak for themselves. The Arab world wants us to win. If anyone is thinking that the continuation of this war would actually hamper Arab-Israeli relations, he is wrong. When we achieve a decisive victory in this war, Israel's regional standing will only go up. Israel is still the superpower in this region, and it is vital that this projection of power will continue, and in time it will also serve in order to expand Arab-Israeli relations, in order to make other Arab countries part of the Abraham Accords and regional prosperity. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you. David, you're on mute.
Thank you, Ophir, for that powerful presentation. It's fascinating how both of the two presentations that we've just heard, General Kupawasser and Mr. Gendelman, reach the same conclusion, that the path to restoration, the path to security, involves the projection of overwhelming Israeli power once again. When Israel transmits hesitation and weakness, Israel's enemies pounce, the enemies of the West attack. The way to fixing that is to destroy Hamas, project, show determination, project power. And I very much appreciate the optimism that was at the tail end of Ophir's presentation, to wit that the Arab world wants Israel to win. And when Israel achieves a decisive victory over Hamas, Israel's regional standing will only improve. But again, the path to doing that is by projecting power. I don't see at the moment too many questions, so I'm going to ask one of my own. And it's a difficult question because to project power effectively in the conflict with Hamas, Israel needs to do things that will be shocking, will be very shocking. It involves crushing, destroying significant parts of the Gaza Strip, killing many, many Hamas, not just leaders, but their entire military structure and infrastructure, and perhaps bringing about the dislocation of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians. My question is, and I'm sure it's on the mind of everybody listening to this call, does Israel have the diplomatic wherewithal? Does it have the political maneuvering room? Does it have its own internal stamina to be able to do what I just described? Do we have the maneuvering room, not only to use our army effectively, but to use it effectively and long enough in order to get the job done? Or is the world going to shut us down, as it has done so many times before? General Kupawasser, do you want to relate to that, please? Yossi, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, I was on mute.
We hear you now.
I don't think it's a real question at this point. At this point, we have all the time we need. There's no sand clock that starts to work for against us. The Americans, as I explained, understand that it's in their interest that we win. It's they want us to win, as I said, properly, working on according to the international humanitarian law and according to the war of law. But they believe, and I believe so too, that we can win the war like that, even if it takes more time. And they want us to win. They are ready to supply whatever is necessary for us to win. And I don't think that we have a problem with that. And I also agree with, to some extent, with Ophir, that many Arabs, I wouldn't say the Arab world, but many Arabs would like us to win. And so I don't think that even if they speak in a way that is critical of what we're doing, because they have to, I don't think that they really mean that we should stop. They want to see Hamas suffer a heavy blow and maybe even losing the control of Gaza. The Egyptians are maybe going to be the first to become worried, because this may be translated into waves of refugees on the way to Egypt. And there's a big question mark on the Egyptian side. So what's going to replace Hamas in Gaza? If it's us, it's fine with them. But if somebody else is going to take over, they want to know in advance what kind of new neighbor is coming to the vicinity. It's clearly an Egyptian issue, but it's not the wider Arab issue. And I think that we have the time. Now, coming to the question of whether we have the time from internally, I think the fact that there is a unity government in Israel speaks a lot. Yes, the Israelis are fed up with the situation that was there beforehand. They understand that there's no way, as I said, of coming back there. No more, or never again in its new version is the message that the public gives the government. And we are working together, and everybody, all these rifts that characterized the Israeli domestic scene until this happened disappeared immediately. All those thoughts that the pilots are not going to serve, and all this nonsense became obsolete within 1 second. And we are united. In a way, I would say that even the United States is more united on that issue than ever. We have a wide American support, from bipartisan support on that. What we may hear all kinds of grudging on behalf of the Europeans. I hope not. I hope they will see the light and understand that the world has to change and their attitude to the conflict has to change. But I'm not at all sure that's going to happen. So in my mind, we shall enjoy quite a wide freedom to maneuver in the coming weeks, maybe month, if necessary. I hope that this will enable us to finish it sooner, because the more international support, the greater the chances are that Hamas will have to give up. And that is the main policy for Israel, is to make Hamas give up. Otherwise, we shall have to look for each and every terrorist, which is going to take longer.
Thank you. Ophir Gendelman, you may want to relate to that as well, but I'd first of all like to direct towards you a question received from one of our listeners abroad. The question from this participant is, how does Saudi Arabia view the current situation? Saudi statements at the beginning of this conflict were not particularly encouraging.
Well, you have to look at public opinion. That's the most important thing. The government, and read between the lines. And what I'm seeing on social media and on Arab media is that Saudis, or at least some Saudis, more Saudis than ever before, are standing with Israel. I've been reading Sharq al-Awsat. It's a Saudi-owned newspaper, one of the most prominent newspapers in the Arab world. It's published in London, but still a very prominent newspaper that reflects the views of the Saudi royal family. And pieces there are absolutely critical of Hamas. Saudis on social media absolutely critical of Hamas and supportive of Israel. Now, I'm not saying that the entire Saudi people is behind Israel, but the Arab world is no longer monolithic. No longer monolithic. And these atrocities that are ISIS-like atrocities give the shiver to every moderate Arab out there. Okay, so I think that's meaningful. On top of that, you should look at how Hamas leadership is trying in the last few hours in order to deflect that Arab criticism of it, not Western criticism of it, but Arab criticism of it, that it is a Palestinian ISIS.
Thank you. Next question from a listener abroad. I'm directing to you, General Kupawasser. How long do you predict this war will last? Will Israeli civilian life go back to a somewhat normal routine anytime soon, despite the war? What's your best guess?
Well, it's really a guess. It's you know, I have a reputation that I carry. That one of my friends reminded me that in the beginning of the Second Intifada, on the first day of the Second Intifada, I said the Second Intifada is going to last 6 years. He reminded me that I said 5, but I think I said 6. And everybody was astonished. And how can you say something like that? And eventually it took exactly 6 years. But this doesn't mean that I can really foresee exactly how long these things are going to take, especially at that time I was in office. My guess is that the heavy exchange of the heavy operation is going to take something like a month. Within a month, we shall control Gaza, in my mind. But it's not doesn't mean that we shall be able to immediately come to return to ordinary lives. So we shall still have to keep some of the reservists. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a burden on Israel for a relatively long time before we can really go to normal life back in Israel. This is my guess. And as I said, there's a possibility that I wouldn't rule out that this is going to, and this would change my calculus. If Hezbollah decides to interfere, then it's a different story.
Okay, thank you. I have a slew of questions here that relate to the intelligence and military defensive failure on the Gaza border this past weekend, but I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to ask you to get into that.
I want to say maybe, David, one thing about it. Okay, I don't want to analyze the failure and all of that. We'll wait for the end of the war. But one thing should be said: the bravery, the courage and heroism of the people that brought back the situation into where it should have been within about 24 hours, a little bit more than 24 hours, and in many places even shorter, is beyond imagination. Working from a point of total weakness, lacking any intelligence picture, lacking any preparations for such a situation, not cognitively and not operationally. Even though, in spite of all of that, they managed to take control of the area within a relatively short period of time, preventing Hamas from the ability to keep on going with this massacre, is something that we should appreciate extremely. And all the stories of the bravery that come out minute after minute are so amazing that you know that people with this kind of spirit are ready to and bound to win in this battle.
Thank you. So as I said, I don't want to go backwards to an analysis of what went wrong. We have quite a few listeners online from the United States and Canada, and the questions that I'm seeing here relate to the extent of Western support for Israel. Of course, President Biden's emotional, stirring address the other day, I view as a high point of his entire political career, and certainly stands as a clarion call of of moral principle from Israel's perspective. The questions coming in are related to how long that might last as the casualty count in Gaza grows, as the criticism from the world of human rights and international lawyers inevitably grows. Already today, we have the European Union accusing Israel of causing starvation in Gaza. They haven't even missed one breakfast yet, and already accusing Israel of starvation. How much can Israel depend on the United States and other allies to carry it through what is obviously going to be a long effort? I know you've related to this already in your remarks earlier, but perhaps each of you might want to say something further.
I'll say the following. We have to be attentive to this potential development. And that's why we need to develop humanitarian corridors and allow all kinds of humanitarian aid that is really justified to come into the Strip. We have to work by the book, as I mentioned before. These are all things that we would show that we take care of, and we are responding to the expectations of the United States. Because what we need to care about is the United States. That's it. The rest of them can say whatever they want. We know what they're going to say. The only thing we care about is the United States, and we have to make sure that the American perspective is being respected. That said, as I said before, I believe that if we do that, we shall have enough leeway to do what needs to be done. We have to keep calling, throwing leaflets to the population in Gaza, telling them to leave the areas, which we didn't do yet. We just called them on radio. But,
no, there are leaflets. There are leaflets. I saw them.
There are leaflets?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so great. But that's what we need to do, and to make sure that they know that there is a way out. There's a humanitarian corridor that allows them to go to safety, and that we have no intention to hit those who are not involved. And but those who live next to a terrorist and decide to stay near him as some kind of human shield, take the risk, and I think everybody would understand that. Those who care about the real situation, and not those who are intentionally looking for an excuse to criticize Israel.
Okay, Ophir, any thoughts on that issue on the diplomatic playing field?
Yeah, the Arab world and Hamas, they all see that the world stands with Israel, with the United States, Europe. They've seen the Israeli flag hoisted and projected on public and government buildings all over Europe. That sends a message. Nobody stands with Hamas and Gaza in the West. I'm not talking about the government. I'm not talking about the Islamists, the Arabs, the extreme Muslims, and the extreme left. That sends a very clear message that Israel has international backing. On top of that, they look at the USS Gerald Ford, a strike group, coming to Israel. And they're seeing this as a very clear message that they think the US is considering entering the war. Now, President Biden's warnings to Iran and Hezbollah to not attack Israel, I think this is a very good example in which, he threatens and carries a very big stick behind his back. Everybody in Lebanon remembers the Marines landing in Beirut in 1958. They remember the Marines in Beirut in 1982. So the fact that America is committed to sending military force in this region is very, very important. I was asked about this on Arab TV channels many times. And I told them, it's very, very clear that if push comes to shove, maybe the Americans will change their policy. But we're not there yet. I think that they are looking at what Israel is doing with a very keen eye. Hezbollah is watching, Iran is watching, and what they're seeing in Gaza resonates also in Beirut, because every Lebanese who sees these pictures on Al Jazeera, which is, like I said, is 150% on the side of Hamas, every Lebanese immediately thinks of his own home, his own neighborhood, his own city, and so forth. And Lebanon is not the Lebanon that they used to know. It's already in shambles. So that's a big factor right there.
Okay, final round of questions and answers. We're going to broaden the lens a little bit to the broader Israeli and Western confrontation with Iran. One would like to believe, one would suppose, that this crisis would also bring about a stiffening of the Western spine against Iran's hegemonic ambitions across the entire region, against Iran's nuclear weapons program, and so forth. And yet, just recently, Biden administration slathered Iran with $6 billion in released assets in exchange for 5 or 6 hostages. There are international sanctions on Iran's nuclear and missile program that are soon to expire, as General Cooper-Wasser mentioned earlier. Are we going to see a new round of Western steps against Iran emerging from this crisis? General Cooper-Wasser?
Well, this is a wishful thinking. We want to see a new attitude towards Iran adopted by the West, but you assume that they have a spine. I'm not convinced yet. It's you just listen to the reactions from the West. They focus on Hamas, but they don't speak about Iran. And I think that it's frustrating as it may be, but I'm not very hopeful at this point. I wish it would happen, but I can't make my wishes my assessment, unfortunately.
Fair.
Well, I'd like to really point out to the West's policy towards the Palestinians, finance support to the PA. And after almost 6 days, Abu Mazen has finally remembered to condemn what happened very, very, let's say, unconvincingly. So I think that what Hamas has done has also harmed not only its own image, but also Palestinian image as a whole in the world. Because, we've seen Palestinians celebrating this, and nobody really differentiates between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip when it comes to public opinion. They're all the same. So I think that the Palestinian cause has taken a hit. The support for Israel is overwhelming, and I hope it will continue, because this will be a very long war. This is not going to be a 6-day war. We're already on the 6th day. And if I have one piece of advice, I think we should really look to achieve complete capitulation of Hamas, complete capitulation. The same as Arafat capitulated in Beirut in 1982, Hamas must capitulate in Gaza in 2023.
On that note,
maybe I'll add one word about what Ophir said, which is very important in my mind, that we have to understand that this entire brainwashing that the Palestinians are going through from day one is done not only by Hamas, but also by the PA. This pay for slay, this textbooks that are filled with hatred and calling for jihad and so on and so forth. This is something that the Europeans have already noticed that they have to do something about. And maybe this turn of event will make them realize that they not only have to do, but they will do something about it. And that I may be more optimistic than on Iran, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much to both our expert briefers today. There will be additional Miskav Institute Zoom briefings of this type next week, probably 2 of them, with several of our senior fellows. Please follow the Miskav Institute on Facebook and Twitter. We also have a WhatsApp community channel that you can join. You'll find the links on our Facebook and Twitter pages. This broadcast will soon appear on the Miskav Institute YouTube page, where you'll be able to watch it, review it once again, and share it with your friends and contacts. I am David Weinberg, founding senior fellow of the Miskav Institute, and I've been your host this afternoon. Conclude this conversation with the hope and prayer for Israeli victory. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.